Welcome to Cribwolf Talks. Today we're joined by Ivan Vasyliv and Betty Vuong from Serotiny Group, who recently presented at the Intentional Community Consortium Housing Forum hosted by KW Habilitation and Caris Disability Services at KW's office in Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario on October 8, 2024. The presentation, titled Reuse, Not Rework, explored innovative approaches to sustainable housing solutions by emphasizing the power of adaptive reuse in construction. Ivan and Betty's work is shaping the future of eco-friendly design, and they're here today to share their insights on how we can rethink the way we build for a more sustainable future. Take a listen.
What we're looking at is more of a product-based system, similar to what you would do with a car. The way cars are built, you don't change the chassis every time. You design the chassis, it runs in the production for 10 years. What you do change is the outfit. You change the bumpers, you change the trim on the inside. And so we're thinking that way about buildings. So we're looking at things that don't really change in a building. You're talking about structural systems, you're talking about mechanical systems, you're talking about the experience, the layouts that you create. All of those things don't change. So, and most of the times we don't actually see those or interact with those. Those are hidden behind walls. So those are the things we find opportunities to standardize while keeping everything flexible. So you can keep the interior layouts, the fit out flexible, the exteriors flexible, the massing flexible. So you combine this efficiency of modular, but then the flexibility to really create different buildings for different sites. To do that, you really need a process, a different type of process. You need a process that captures the little efficiencies all the way, all throughout the development process. One of the challenges with modular construction is you have a lot of teams that are fragmented, and they're each focusing on their own little segment. But in order to get all those benefits that people promise you with modular construction, they don't come in big packages. There's no silver bullet. It's little things along the way that when you combine them together is where you get the advantage. So what we've created, our process is end-to-end, everything from design to procurement management, to manufacturing management, to logistics management and assembly management. So when we think about design, we're not only thinking about creating interiors, we're thinking about how it impacts all those elements along the process. So when we see an opportunity to save costs by standardizing mechanical systems and standardizing a lot of the panels, we do that early on. Now, to do that, we're working with a globally proven system. So we're a licensed partner of CRE. It's a hybrid timber system. So it's not purely mass timber. It's a composite precast panel. So it's a concrete slab that you would do traditionally with precast concrete, but it uses wood elements, wood beams and columns. And what that provides a lot of different advantages. One of the advantages being that it's about a third of the weight of concrete, but you still get your fire protection, you still get your water protection during construction, you still get your sound protection, so you don't need any additional toppers on site, and you get the speed where you assemble about a floor a day. Now, the other benefit of doing it this way is that the structural system and the envelope are both part of the same system. So as you're putting up the envelope, you're enclosing the building sequentially. So you can start your interior fit out as soon as you're done the first floor. The other benefit about doing a hybrid system as opposed to one or the other is that it really frees up the manufacturing to be decentralized. So traditionally, when you think about mass timber, you're thinking about big factories that take long to produce, there's capacities. With this, it's a high-performance system that's built with very rudimentary manufacturing techniques. We're talking about precast, we're talking about traditional wood framing that that we can produce locally. So we work with a lot of local partners in each region to make sure that these buildings get produced within about an hour and a half away from their site. That's another way we manage costs. That's another way we manage the risk of delays, the supply chains, is we work with local manufacturers to achieve that. It also allows us to scale across regions. You're not tied to a big factory. You don't have the capital cost that then you have to offload onto your clients or onto developers. We're working with it sort of on a decentralized manner. And the other benefit is that you're not inventing a system. Like I mentioned, there's lots of systems out there, but practically they take a decade to really produce in the market. There's all the safety testing, all of the structural testing. This system has been used all across the world on a number of buildings, a number of different codes for over 10 years. So what we've done is we've brought it to Canada, adapted it to our local codes, worked with the local manufacturers to train them up to be able to deploy it. Now, this is where I think we got introduced to Rena and Brian. Our strategy now is how do we use this system to create more affordable housing? How do we scale affordable housing? And part of what we see as some of the big challenges are challenges of evaluating project using modular construction. The due diligence process really takes a long time. There's not a lot of players that know it, so there's a lot of premiums always attached to it that shouldn't really exist. Another issue is that there's no steady pipelines, and if you talk to a lot of manufacturers, they'll say, we had a couple of projects where we worked with local manufacturers. They said, our pipeline is booked up until 2028. We can't do it. So how do you deal with pipelines? If you don't have enough pipelines, they're not willing to take on a big project. If you have too big of a pipeline, they can't fulfill it. So how do you manage the supply chain of it? Cost certainty is another. I think last presentation mentioned costs fluctuate. So how do you manage those conditions? So for us, we're able to manage it because we're productize all of the elements. We have close relationships to our manufacturing partners. We actually have price freezes for years where we can produce the same element at the same cost. So not only do you have the benefits of being able to assess it quicker, you have the benefit, so you're not fluctuating with the costs, yearly costs, but you have the benefits of further being locked into a lot of the costs with the manufacturer. So you don't have surprises down the line when you're evaluating it. We're also looking at a number of different funding opportunities that we'll discuss a bit later at the end. But once you start to think about modular construction, creating pipelines of projects and creating steady streams, there's a lot of options to start to create new financial products to assist with early pre-construction funding. So Betty's going to talk about that a little bit later on. And the last thing is about long-term affordability. When we talk about affordability, one of our missions very early on is to make sure that we're not only building affordable units, but they stay affordable. When we look at a lot of housing built in the 70s, 60s, community housing built in the time, now when you look at them, a lot of times the maintenance costs are just as much as the rent. And so even though you say the rent is affordable, the total cost of living is not. So we're really thinking about how do we build better so that maintenance is lower, the quality of life is better, and that the project stays affordable over time. Not only livable, but affordable. And so part of what we do with the systems is, part of the reason we do concrete is that you can do in-floor heating and cooling. So what you would assume is typically like a high-end product, it actually provides about 50% savings on the hard cost and then 50% less operational demand throughout the building. So when we talk about operational efficiency, all of that is built in. So when you're building the structure, your mechanical system is partially built as well, and you get the operational long-term efficiency as well. So when we started working with Rena about this idea of how do you create housing, affordable housing, how do you have it be scalable, and how do you share those benefits with a lot of the industry? Because what is very clear is that in order to combat this sort of rework that happens in the industry, all these additional costs that happen project to project, you need to be able to standardize and take out a lot of that rework. So we work really closely with them to standardize, to really learn about their model and customize buildings and templates of buildings that work with their model. So this would be everything from unit layouts, fire codes, B3 fire code, accessibility requirements, energy requirements to meet both the CMHC lending criteria, but also operational demands, assembly logistics. We wanted to make sure that when we design these buildings, we know the machinery that's going to be used to install them. We know the costs associated with that. Same thing with all the parts. We know all the parts. We can order them. We know where to secure the supply chain, and also working back end on the pro forma. So when we design these buildings, they're executable buildings. They're not buildings that then will get passed on to some other consultant and they will test it, and then we would have to come back and rework it. The advantage of sitting down early, getting all the requirements, is that you can design prototypes that meet all of the criteria, and you can optimize the shape and the scale of the building to that they all work. So you can work backwards. Instead of testing one at a time, you can create a series of rules and criteria and find a building that meets all of those criteria. So that's what we did to get us started. We had two prototypes, one for a tower, so something for a more urban site where you might have a smaller lot. One is more of a bar building where you maybe have a larger lot. But part of that is that all of the parts that we created, all of the units, are reusable between the two configurations. So they're fully engineered and can be used on a number of different sites and a number of different buildings. So the process starts very simply. There's really two parts of the problem. One, we understand what the system is. We have a deep understanding, and our system is digitized. All the rules of the system is digitized. Then on the other hand, you have to marry that with the requirements for the space that we're creating. We need a livable space. There's certain requirements for accessibility, structural requirements. And really our challenge is to make sure that we avoid the typical pitfall of taking a modular system and then making it so custom that it's not really efficient anymore. So you have to marry this this challenge of what do you standardize, what do you keep typical, and what do you keep flexible throughout the way. So you do have different units, but at the same time you have some repeatability that during the manufacturing process, during the assembly process, procurement process, you have standard components that you can create. And so one of the units, this is an example of one of the units, one of the larger units, again, working very closely with those specific requirements, making sure that it's not only designed for now, but it's future-proof for later. So Brian mentioned B3 fire code. All of the buildings that's built in. When we're talking about energy efficiency, the window ratios, the specifications for the windows, the amount of rooms, all of that is built into the pro forma as well. So when you're getting a design, you know that it works on the operational level, manufacturing level, and on the design level. One example being the washrooms, standard washrooms across all the board, all accessible, all built with infrastructure that if they needed to be upgraded with accessibility handles, things like that, all of that is built in. Washrooms are completely bathtub as well, so if there's any spills, all of that is maintained. And there's also opportunity to have them prefabricated as well, something that we're looking at. But in general, it's thinking about, also how do you couple mechanical systems. So in part of the plans that we created, the washrooms are backing kitchens as well. So we're using the same prefabricated mechanical shafts from project to project. So again, when you're thinking about a simple thing like that, it's not just that we're creating a kitchen. You're thinking about how much less time now engineers need to spend engineering all the different types of kitchens with small variations. When you're thinking about how many times that the CNC routers and the precasters have to prepare different molds for different panels. When you're thinking about how you organize panels in the factory, where you reduce the amount of times. When you're thinking about the assembler having to sequence certain things, these small design decisions early on have repercussions down the line. And unless you're thinking about all of those items that I mentioned in a circle, you're not really getting the cost benefits. You might get a cost benefit on one item, but not the other. And of course, from that, you create a logic of how a washroom, how does a living space look, what are the clearances for accessibility, and you scale that to all the different unit types. And you create models where those units can then be assembled and squeezed and tested in different configurations on different sites. So really, the key here is building that logic, that operational logic, the design logic, and then you can use that to really test a number of different configurations. So you don't have to go select a site and then create a custom thing to look for it. You can start to look for sites that fit the models and the buildings that will work. And this, when we're talking about configuration, we're talking about end-to-end configuration. We're talking about your construction cost, your development cost, your suite mixes and affordability levels, the revenue and operating costs, and the energy savings. All of that is built in on a per unit basis. So you get a full understanding early on of how that happens. So I'm going to show you a little bit of a video about what happens when you do create a model, what you can then use it for. So one of the first things you can do, like I mentioned, you can reverse search the sites that work. So when you think about a due diligence process, once you have that model set up of the unit logic and the template logic, you can start to evaluate sites very quickly to see whether they work from the pro forma level, from the cost perspective as well. So you can see here an example of a site getting configured using that model, units being laid out based on a preferred unit mix and affordability sequence, all coming through with interior layouts. So when you're thinking about how much time we spend creating the same interior layouts over and over again, how many labor hours as an industry we've spent redesigning the same one bedrooms, it doesn't need to be that way. You can automate it. You can start to optimize it across multiple sites. So really that's the advantage of looking at it more of a portfolio level, whether it's one non-for-profit or multiple grouped together. By standardizing the components across multiple sites, you get the efficiency of a large-scale development and small infill housing. So you don't, this traditional notion that you need 200 units, 400 units for a modular to be efficient is not really true. You can group smaller buildings together and get the same manufacturing efficiency, same design efficiency. You're saving a lot on design because you don't have to redesign a lot of the engineering. At the same time, you get the flexibility to make different buildings on different sites. So here's an example when we say a lot of the engineering is built in. So all the rule sets for the panels, all the manufacturing logic are built in. So when we're designing these buildings, we know exactly the amount of screws, the amount of components that go into them. We can price them out. So when we deliver a cost, it's not a Class D budget, it's a Class B budget for the modular components because we know exactly the price that we get from the manufacturer. Same thing for the facade components. We know exactly the amount of parts you have, and they're configurable. If we want to change the windows, we want to change the facade to be a bit different, that process changes as well. But more importantly is that the entire manufacturing process is mapped out as well. So when we talk about local manufacturers, they don't need to build a new dedicated factory. We can show them the process where they can use upgrade their small factories to produce this. We're actually working with a framer in Toronto called Cube Building Systems, and we're working them with the NGen grant for advanced manufacturing, essentially set up to create digital work processes, so essentially simulations like you saw of how every piece gets assembled and where. And that's what we're going to use to train up everybody across the country, because then there would be it's not a matter of interpreting 2D drawings. It would be a very sort of a very clear process about how each of this is done.
And just to say, we did all that for Brian and Rena in about a month, right? We cut down that evaluation process quite quickly. So I think Ivan has expressed very clearly the determination, to hark back to Tim's presentation. So now the money. How do you actually make it work? What we're trying to figure out is a solution, not just with nonprofits, but also maybe working with cities and municipalities, colleges and universities, of how to bundle these projects together. In the very beginning, we talked about how projects are delivered one by one, right? So you also finance them and underwrite them one by one. Now, it's a slow and costly process. So what we're trying to figure out is there a way to bundle the financing of these controllable parts, these modular parts that don't change? Can we bundle them with financing across multiple sites, multiple projects? And to achieve that, what you really need is a pipeline. You need a pipeline that's steady, that's consistent. So from a lender's perspective, they know what they're expecting. From a schedule perspective, the amount of capital outlays expected. But also from a supplier and manufacturer perspective, they know how to optimize their resources to give you the best cost and the cost certainty to mitigate price volatility when you order parts. So that's the key to unlocking the cost certainty and reducing these equity requirements. What I think one of you asked about the cost of mobilizing modular construction. Well, I think the big elephant in the room is, yes, modular construction does compress timelines significantly. We saw that with the previous presentation as well. And that's because we can stack activities, right? While something is happening off-site, you can prepare other stuff on-site and vice versa. But what that also implies is you need a lot more money up front. You need the money to order the parts. You need the money to manufacture the parts. And all that happens in your factory off-site, but also typically before your construction financing kicks in, becomes available. Because that becomes available when your on-site construction activity begins. So there's a funding gap that is probably likely why modular construction adoption across the industry has been so low. Because who else has all that money up front? And when we're talking about affordable housing, that is just a huge hurdle to cross. So what we're looking at is decoupling risk in a project, right? So on the left side here, if you're looking at the whole project, you've got all these risks commingled, right? That are more or less uncontrollable if you put them all together. You've got your market risk, you've got your construction risk, regulatory, your teams might change, right? Your supply chain. What we're trying to do is at least focus on the risks that we can control and look at those modular products as assets that are controlled in a factory. We can control the costs, and we are trying to find a financial solution to bundle those products across multiple sites. And we have confidence in that because, like Ivan said, it's a globally proven system, right? It's resistant to water, it's resistant to fire, but it's also readily available. It's standard off-the-shelf products, so there's no supply chain risk there. And it's also very high performing. So there's this certified product that we want to package as an investable asset, and that's what we want to bundle across multiple sites. And what we're looking to do is expand that range of funding options, right? Because now you can talk about possibility of tapping into larger funds like institutional capitals, especially those oriented to with high impact criteria like ESG or other socially driven funds, right? What's difficult with unlocking those type of funds is they're attracted to very large scale projects. There's a minimum size. There's also a lot of questions about what are they investing in. So we're trying to figure out a solution and position our products where it's the risks are completely controlled. It's repeatable. So even if in the worst case event that a project, is canceled or defaults, you can reuse the exact same product on another project. So there's a lot of reuse in these products.
That brings us to the end of today's episode, and what a fantastic discussion it's been. The ICC Housing Forum was a major success, providing a valuable platform for knowledge exchange among professionals in the housing space. It sparked important conversations about how organizations and landowners can play a key role in creating more affordable housing for people with diverse abilities. A big thank you to our guests and to everyone who participated in making the forum such a fruitful event. And of course, thank you to our listeners for joining us on Cribwolf Talks. We look forward to bringing you more insightful discussions in future episodes. If you have missed any of our shows, find us on YouTube and like and subscribe Cribwolf Talks. Remember, let's help those who need our help.